This is Southampton Town Supervisor Jay Schneiderman calling to order this work session of the Southampton Town Board on this 11th day of June, 2020. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to
the
republic
which
which
stands
one
nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It is. All right. Sunday, would you call the roll?
Supervisor Schneiderman,
Here.
Councilwoman Ostad,
Here.
Councilman Martel,
Here.
Councilman Bouvier,
Here.
Councilman Scavone.
Here.
All right. So we're all here. We are still meeting via Zoom. So we're in different places, but we're all together in the internet. This hopefully will be a relic soon as we move, from the pandemic, as we move back into meeting in person. I think next week's work session will probably be the last Zoom, and then following that, probably the first one in July, we'll try to go in person. So we'll do our best using technology. It's not the easiest thing to do here. So before we get to the main item on our agenda, which will be a presentation of the 2019 annual financial report by Naraki Smith, let's just get a brief update on our pandemic response. We're joined today by Ryan Murphy, who is our public safety director and also has been coordinating the town's response to COVID-19. And Ryan, we spoke with Ryan a little bit on Tuesday, so there's probably not much new here, but maybe we can get a quick update, and if board members have any questions, this would be a good time.
Sure. Thanks, Supervisor. Just a real quick update here. Restaurants, we've developed a procedure by which they can have some emergency relief for outdoor dining. We've been engaging with them for a couple of weeks now leading up to this to prepare them for it. And we've been getting submissions into the Fire Marshal's office for emergency relief and expansion of their outdoor dining facilities. We actually just received a tent permit application go along with today for one of the restaurants. That's going well. Tried to make it as simple and fast a process as possible, and I would applaud my fire marshal's office and Chief Rankin for doing this as well as they're doing it to make it easy for the restaurants to try and gain some additional business. We have also given art galleries that have retail sales of art the ability to open, and communicated that to them the other day. Thank you to Councilman Schiavone for having me on with the committee to discuss some of their possibilities for reopening and the future outlook for some of their facilities and programs that they have. We are working with the Parks Department to continue to make the access process for beaches for residents as smooth as possible. And thank you to Katie, who's on the call with us today, working with Kristen Doulos and I to draft up a very simple attestation form, which helps us to deal with some of the backlog of applicants for rental permits. What we're finding is that people who have not been renting with a permit for the last 15, 20 years are now encouraged to get a permit because of the residency requirements. So it's created a huge influx of permits. It's a side effect of the process. It's a good thing. It's definitely a good thing, but Katie helped us to develop a form that makes the process much faster for people to be able to secure their beach access permits in light of the huge influx. We all know we are in phase 2 as of yesterday. I think everybody's excited to be there. And the only other thing I'd like to update on at this point too is the Southampton TLC program. the town litter crew program. We will be rolling out as of Monday. We have at least one crew identified as of right now, so we're gonna, it might be a little bit of a slow spin up before we get all three out on the road, but we are definitely launching with at least one crew as of Monday. My hope is to have at least two as of Monday out on the road. We had, I thought, a second person that's an excellent candidate for us yesterday, but she may have other employment that's more long-term afforded to her. So obviously she would make the choice to go with a long-term solution as opposed to our, 2-month-long program. But I'm hoping we have two full crews out on Monday, and then hopefully by the close of next week, all three are out and engaged and helping to remediate the problem in the communities. So we're doing good with that. We're on the right track, and we will have them up and running as of June 15th, pretty much right on our target to get them out there, and they'll be running through till August is the current plan.
Right. So questions for Ryan. Ryan, you said that the galleries were opened. What about museums?
Yeah, unfortunately, museums still fall into phase 4, but Councilman and I had some creative conversation with some of our institutions the other day on a call, and some of them may be working up some ways to get their doors open as soon as possible.
Okay.
And I know we have a call tomorrow, Supervisor, myself and you, and I believe Chief Skrzynecki, with some of the other museums and institutions as well. So I think we're all working together, and we've advocated. You asked me to reach out to the county and have them petition the state for increases to the maximum of non-essential people that can gather. I have submitted that and got acknowledgement back from the county that they are requesting to the state to up the number from 10 to 25. They're going to make that a blanket request, but I also specified to them that if the state seemed unwilling to do that, perhaps they could encourage the state to do it with at least, as you and I had discussed, educational programs, if nothing else, where they could gather to the tune of 25 people for like outdoor educational programs. So
yeah, we had a request from South Fork Natural History Museum they typically do hikes of 20 people, and it just seems like a very low risk type of activity, full social distancing. It's just one trail or hike leader and 20 people sort of following behind, 6 feet apart. And so we're looking to see if those things can be permitted. Ryan, what about fireworks? July 4th is coming. Typically the community gets to enjoy a number of fireworks displays. Right now, no, right? They're not allowed, but it seems that would be a low-risk activity. You certainly, just like a drive-in movie, you could spread out like we spread out on the beaches.
Yeah, I don't think it's out of the question. I think we should talk about that. I think there are possibly some ways, either through social distancing at outdoor dining and some other setups that we can come up with where people may be able to enjoy something like that. Yes, the gathering restrictions are still upon us right now. Right now it's 10 or less, so obviously any big gatherings for fireworks would be really tough. But I don't know that it totally precludes us from having some sort of a show if people socially distance themselves out on a beach the same way they would any other day, and outdoor dining establishments that may have views of wherever the display is going to occur, where people might be able to enjoy something like that. So I wouldn't rule it out. I think it's worth having a conversation about.
Okay.
Could I just say something on that? I think you need to clarify that those are done through a permitting process so that we don't have individuals maybe watching thinking it's okay to just do this in their backyards. And because we get a lot of issues in small communities where people are setting off a lot of fireworks, and sometimes it creates dangerous situations.
Noted, without a doubt. If you're going to be setting off fireworks, you should be securing a permit to do so.
I'd also like to thank Ryan for coming to the Southampton Arts and Cultural Committee meeting this week. For the past couple of weeks, we've been putting together various plans for institutions to open, and we are going to be requesting that arts institutions, galleries, and the like be moved out of phase 4 to, I guess, phase 3, or maybe hopefully phase 2. But, you know, they're large areas, and you know, we feel that they should not be in phase 4, and that people can socially distance and enjoy art safely.
All right. Any other questions for Ryan? All right. Thank you, Ryan, for the update. So let's move on then, and we'll go to financial matters, and maybe I'll have Len introduce the annual financial report. But Len, would you also update us on the bond sale that took place yesterday too?
Sure. As you know, we were going out to market yesterday, and we were selling about $20 million worth of our bonds to fund this year's capital program. And the market conditions were good, much better than they were in the past month or so. So we were able to secure a rate on the $20 million of a blended rate of about 1.69%. So there was a bunch of negotiation going on yesterday because there was a little bit of structure to the deal that had to be worked out. But I worked it out with our investment advisor, went through with Jay with the structure, and but overall the rate came in at 1.69, and we should be closing on that sale within a week or so.
Yeah. So that's the effective rate. It's, you know, under 2% is pretty inexpensive money to borrow. So, you know, for those,
and this is 20-year maturity stuff, so it's long term.
Yeah. So this is, you know, clearly a very good time to get capital projects done, where we can take advantage of, you know, our high credit rating, our top credit rating, and, you know, very low interest rate rates. So that's very, very low.
Yeah. It was purchased by Fidelity Investments in Boston. So they when they get involved with the bidding, they don't really waste their time not to bid and not win it. So they were actually significantly lower than the next bidder. So we enjoyed a very good, a lot of bidders was also is a good sign. A lot of people want to buy Southampton debt.
Any questions
Any
on
questions?
that issue? And just Len, before we move on, so that's basically that money will go toward the 2 projects in the Hampton Bays Water District, right? It'll go toward the refurbishing of the Hampton Bays Senior Center. What else?
Yeah, it funded the purchase of the senior center. It funded Hampton Bays Water District. There's the $6 million in bonds there. And it also, the major purchase, there was a $2.5 million we borrowed for the Southampton ambulance barn. And then obviously our rest of our capital program, including highway, parks,
right,
you know, police, etc. Town hall updates.
Okay, excellent. All right, so Len, do you want to tell us maybe, you know, for the public's edification too, you know, why we do a yearly audited financial statement and what it is?
Sure. Yeah. Well, the town annually, you know, we close our books in December, and we, on a fiscal basis, we like that. You know, we have an annual audit. I'm not actually sure if it's required for us to have an annual audit. We have to file an annual AUD, but Dave can talk about whether or not it's required. But anyway, we do have an annual audit, and we've been also submitting our financial statements to the Government Finance Officers Association for their review afterwards. And since I've been here since 2012, and we have been receiving what's called the Certificate of Excellence, which means our financial reporting meets the highest level of standards in terms of disclosure, accuracy, and clarity for people to understand and read and make sense of our financials. So on this process, we've been awarded that for the past 8 years, and I hope we would get awarded it again this year, we're certainly going to submit these financials on time. Part of that is we have to submit them to the oversight group by June 30th. So that's why we needed to get this reviewed by the board. You folks have to have a chance to review it and then adopt a final version of the audit at the next meeting so that we have time to submit it. But basically, I'll let the auditors go through our financials, but consistent with what we've done in the past, we've been very, in my opinion, they can comment on it, very accurate with our financial records. We are very diligent. Dorothy and our crew in the controller's office are very diligent in keeping track of our finances, postings, accurate accounting policies, procedures, and we follow what we say we're going to do. So the town board has enacted policies, and we follow those policies. So those policies lead to overall financial control and overall accountability, so that when you read the numbers and when we present numbers, you can rely on those numbers. And that's something that I take pride in. And I think the town of Southampton was one of the first towns on Long Island to get a AAA rating, also as a result of our accurate financial accounting and our conservative budgeting and fiscal practices. So I'm also very proud of that, and the board has been good leaders in that, and following those conservative policies and adopting budgets that are conservative, and following good practices in terms of how we do our finances. So with that, I'm going to introduce Dave, and Dave's a partner at Naraki Smith, and Sean O'Malley's the audit manager who pretty much handled the day-to-day operations. I'm not sure which one of you is going to go first, but I'll leave it up to you.
No, thank you, Len. I'll start. This is Dave Tellier. And just to kind of dovetail off of what Len was saying, I think that the town should be very proud in the way in which its financial systems have been, been maintained over the course of the last several years and even before. To that credit, the town has been able to submit its financial statements and receive the award for Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting for a number of years now. And we feel that this report that we will submit for this year will indeed, again, achieve that award. And I think it also leads to some of the other things we're going to talk about, which Len kind of touched on, is just the manner in which the records are maintained is truly remarkable. We went through our year-end audit, and we had no audit adjustments. I mean, so that right there is a very significant point to make, is just that this isn't just a one small business. This, with the town and with the fund structure in which it has to maintain, it's almost like 15 separate little businesses rolling up into one. And some of the accounting can get very tricky and can kind of get a little cumbersome, and just time after time we've experienced just the accuracy of the books is really tremendous, and that really is a sign of how well the controller's office is maintaining, and all the individuals throughout that are consistently doing their jobs to the fullest. So we really wanted to make sure we spoke about that, but we also wanted to say thank you for all of their diligent and hard work and effort throughout the course of the audit engagement, as well as the year in doing so. And just one last remark before I go into our presentation is that you are required to have an audit performed on a yearly basis. So that is a requirement that we have to fill through New York State law. So that was one of the things I think was left open in the conversation. So I'll go through. We had a brief presentation, but again, Sean and I are here to be able to answer any questions that anyone may have, relating to the audit report, or just the process of the audit. So anything you have that you'd like to ask us, we'd be more than happy to answer. So kind of going through our prepared statements. The first is the scope of services. Naraki Smith was contracted by the town to perform the audit of the December 31st, 2019 financial statements. And in doing so, there are several other reports that we will issue. One is our single audit of federal award programs that's administered through the town, as well as an audit of the Justice Court. And there's some other departments and some other areas that are required to have reports issued that we have all compiled and put together for the town to make sure that we meet all of the necessary filing deadlines and requirements based on not only the New York state law, but also town law. Quickly, I'll kind of let maybe Sean jump in here and just kind of talk about the conduct of the audit, because as the board knows, obviously with the onset of COVID-19, we had to kind of blend the way in which we conducted our audit this year. So I'd like Sean to talk a little bit about that, because again, I think this will also give you a great appreciation of the way in which the records are being maintained and kept at the town.
Yeah, no problem. So in a typical year, which obviously this is not, we're on site at the town hall for about roughly the entire month of March. Roughly 4 weeks, we're upstairs, we're going through all the files, records, substantiating all the balances that we need to go through. The one thing that really stands out to us about the way that the town keeps all of their records is that all invoices, supporting documentation, everything is maintained in an electronic database. So for us, we're really not going back and forth with Dorothy, Len, their team, and making specific requests. Probably 95% of what we need to go through is in the computer system for us. So we really have the ability to blow through things, look for what we need without really interrupting the day-to-day work of the comptroller's office. This year, we were able to get about the first 2 weeks of March on-site fieldwork done before the pandemic struck. And probably the last day that town hall allowed visitors, we were on site and we were working with Len, Dorothy, and the IT department, and we were able to set up remote access to the servers, which really allowed us to seamlessly transition from on-site fieldwork to remote access fieldwork. And because of the way that all the town's documents are stored, we really weren't missing a beat in terms of the timeline of our fieldwork. So certainly that's the biggest takeaway that we wanted to commend the town for this year, is just the manner in which all the documents are maintained, the accuracy of the information, and just that it certainly, in this unique situation, made everything very streamlined and easy to complete, whereas in other situations, it would have been much more of a headache and a time-consuming process. So yeah, thanks to Len, thanks to Dorothy, thanks to the IT department in particular, that we were able to get everything done on our normal timeline.
And I would just like to chime in and thank the Records Management Division, because we introduced that electronic document management system some time ago, coordinating with the IT department, and it really made a tremendous difference in how you do your audits. And I'm so grateful to hear that, in this type of situation, it was so beneficial too. Thank you.
It truly was. We're in various situations with other clients where we were either in the midst of the audit or we were about to start the audit when the pandemic hit. And I will tell you, the experiences that we're going through is quite different than what we went through here with the town. So again, I mean, just the willingness of the town to embrace the technology aspect of this and to have the foresight to be able to do this and the wherewithal to do this years ago, really now, you could start seeing what the benefits are of those, of that, and how, again, it was easy for us, but we also feel that there was a lot of easy transition for a lot of the town employees as well because of that type of a system. So not that anybody could have ever forethought that this would happen, but to have the ability to be able to do that, again, just speaks a lot about the town and the willingness and preparedness that it did put in place, over the financial systems.
If I could also just mention, as a result of that, our office pretty much functioned 100% normal, whether or not we were in the office or remote. I have two computers right now I'm looking at. I'm looking at one in front of me, one to my left. One is with the town systems, one is my Zoom meeting. And there's nothing I can't do here other than face-to-face contact that I could do from my desk at Town Hall. So, it's pretty remarkable on the technology that we have. And then our workers are very productive that way.
I'm so glad to hear all of this, honestly, because we worked so hard and got a lot of pushback in the very beginning of all of that. And it all has worked out so well many years later. So I'm grateful to have been a part of that with all of you. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think also in the future, this coming year, we're going to have a lot of reimbursements from Homeland Security and other sources because of the pandemic. It's going to make life a lot easier, I think, for you in particular, Len, when we start to approach FEMA and approach Homeland Security for some of these reimbursement costs. So thank you.
Thanks.
So then just to talk about the audit report a little bit. First, we did meet with the Audit Advisory Committee last week on June 4th, where we went through the financial statements in more detail and made that presentation to them before we are making this presentation today, as we've been doing in the past. And we'll just kind of give you some highlights on the overall financial statements, because again, it's about a 160-page document, give or take. So we've kind of condensed it down to about a 5-minute discussion, just trying to give you the highlights of the report if you had the opportunity to go through it. But first and foremost, the biggest thing is our auditor's report. It reflects a clean or unmodified opinion, which means that the financial statements are presented in accordance with U.S. generally accepted accounting principles, and that the audit was conducted in accordance with U.S. generally accepted auditing standards, and that the financial statements are free of material misstatement as presented. As you know from years past, the actual financial statements have it's what's termed 2 different sets of financial statements. The first is your government-wide or financial statements, or your full accrual financial statements. These are the ones that are most closely resemble like a for-profit business. So some of the takeaways on your full accrual statements is you have total assets and deferred outflows of resources of $1.3 billion. The lion's share of that is really your capital assets net of accumulated depreciation, which represents about $1.15 billion. And this number increased approximately $40 million from the previous year due to current year capital projects, as well as CPF purchases netted out of your current year depreciation charges. Your total liabilities and deferred inflows of resources total about $486 million. During the current year, you had a serial bond issuance as well as a refunding bond issuance totaling $27.8 million. And the other large balance within your total liabilities is your other post-employment benefit obligation. That's the actuarial determined amount that would be due to your past as well as current employees for retirement for health benefits when they retire, which totals about $337 million. The actuary changed some of the assumptions from last year to this year, primarily with the discount rate and some other things. So we actually had a substantial increase in this from the previous year of a little over $78 million to give it to that total of $337 million. So out of all of this, then you have your assets minus your liabilities equals your net position, or your retained earnings, if you will, of about $932 million, which was an increase from the previous year of about $27 million. After the full accrual statements, you have what's termed your governmental fund financial statements. Those financial statements are based on the fund level, which is what's managed on a day-to-day basis through the controller's office. They're really basically looking at the current focus, or almost like a cash basis, if you will, because it doesn't represent long-term items such as long-term debt and your capital assets and things of that nature. It's more of a current focus. So with all of your funds consolidated together on the balance sheet, you had total assets of just under $158 million, primarily consisting of cash and accounts receivable. You had total liabilities and deferred inflows of about $27 million, leaving you with total fund balance of just under $131 million across all your funds. And your fund balance, there are 5 different components of fund balance. There is a non-spendable portion, which means that that's monies that have already been spent, but it's for the upcoming year. That's really prepaid items, and that totaled $4.6 million. The biggest balance is within your restricted fund balance amounts, which totals a little over $97 million. And that is primarily the CPF fund. That's the lion's share of what's considered restricted. There are some other restrictions for debt service and items of that nature. And these are items, again, that are legally restricted and set aside monies for certain purposes. You have a little over $13 million in assigned funds. These are monies that are either assigned specifically to the funds that they're within, or monies that are assigned to balance the upcoming year's budget. And then you have a total of just under $16 million in unassigned, undesignated funds in your main general fund. For the year, your funds had a total decrease in fund balance of about $27 million. But of that $27 million, $25.5 million of it represents the decrease within the CPF fund due to land purchases being greater than the money that was taken in within that fund. So again, I've said this in the past, the CPF fund really can skew the results one way or the other on all, when you're looking at all the funds, because it is such a large operating fund, and year to year, we can't really budget or gauge how much money is going to kind of come in that fund. So that fund does sway the numbers quite a bit. So I wanted to make sure I pointed that out. But for the year, the funds had total revenues of just under $158 million to total expenditures of about $200 million. And then the other financing areas, which are like non-operating revenues, totaled $15.5 million. And that was primarily relating to the serial bond issuance in the current year at that time. The rest of the financial statements, what was nice is that this year there were no new GASB or accounting pronouncements that we had to implement. So the structure of the overall financial statement presentation is consistent with the previous year. There are new note disclosures or new required schedules or anything of that matter. So we got a kind of a 1-year reprieve. There will be changes in the upcoming year, which I will bring to your attention when we go through and implement them and figure out the way in which the town will implement them is probably a better way to describe that. So, but there will be some changes in the financial statements in the next upcoming year. And I think the biggest thing that I wanted to also talk about, which it's nice to end this kind of really going back to the beginning of our conversation here, is talking about how strong the controller's office is and the internal controls within the town. Obviously, as we go through our audit, one of the things we're required to do is if there are any deficiencies or issues that we come up with, we should report them to the oversight board, which would either be the audit advisory committee or the town board. We had no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies identified through our audit engagement. We had no recommendations for improvement for any of the policies that we reviewed, nor the procedures that we kind of go through in the conduct of our audit. So again, kind of wrapping up the presentation, I think it's a good point to again make, is that we feel that the town is positioned very strongly and the foothold to go forward on a financial end is very strong. And I hope that this brief presentation kind of gives you that credence to what I'm saying, is that we as the external auditors are very happy with not only the makeup of the controller's office and the very segregation of duties, but also the policies that they've put in place to administer the transactions on a day-to-day basis, and that everything is being followed to those policies, which I think is the biggest thing that we could share with you, as the oversight board, to give you that comfort level that what they're telling you they're doing is what they're actually doing, and they're doing it very well. So that's pretty much our prepared comments. Again, we'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody may have for us.
Jay, you're not on.
No, it's good.
I did have a question, just sort of a little bit esoteric, but going into the future, the ability, we've expended monies in reaction to the COVID pandemic, And I don't really have a sense of how much that is. We may be talking about a smaller amount than I seem to have in my head. But going forward, I know in the past, particularly at least my experience with some other federal agencies, is that the difficulties in getting those costs reimbursed, it sort of languishes into years. And I just wanted to sort of get your sense of that and how that may impact us going into the future.
Well, I agree with you. I think, you know, in our past experience with things of this nature, you know, the most closely item that I could think of would kind of be Superstorm Sandy. You know, would be the big event that kind of came out of nowhere that we incurred a lot of costs, and then we had to, you know, most municipalities had to deal with FEMA and other agencies for reimbursement, and it took a very long time. So I would, unfortunately, I'd probably agree with you and anticipate that would probably be something that would be similar in that regard, that it will probably take us some time to get reimbursed fully. I don't see them withholding certain payments, but I do see it kind of taking a little bit of time to do that. The good thing is that, again, I think, because all those obviously expenses happened in year 2020, so we don't see them. So I don't know the grand scope of those exact purchases, but from the numbers that we've audited and that you ended with at the end of the year to go in, I do feel that you have a good position to absorb that for the time being until that money does come in. I mean, that's our sense. I know Len can speak better to that regard.
Yeah, John, the board appropriated, we established, we have a disaster fund that we used in Sandy so that we could segregate all the costs. And the board appropriated, I believe, $150,000 about 2 months ago. I've pretty much fully exhausted that. Christine Fenton had some additional costs. She came to me this morning. She's got a proposal to do about $30,000 worth of modifications at the Justice Court. So there's going to be a resolution at the next meeting appropriating an additional $50,000 into that fund. But it's not, we haven't had that much in significant outlays. You know, a hurricane is much more cash intensive for us than this pandemic. You know, we're not in the health business. You know, we're not in the you know, that's not our area. I mean, we may have lost some revenues, but I'm actually not seeing that either. So, you know, we're in a pretty good spot with regard to that. And we've established our FEMA claim now. We can submit interim claims if we wanted to, but, you know, being that I've only spent $150,000, there's a lot of paperwork to submit a claim. So I just assume wait and bundle it until I have a, you know, a good amount. And in my mind, if that would be $250,000, I'm not, you know, like, I'll wait until we've accumulated that kind of cost, and then we'll submit an interim claim. And the federal government has streamlined the process with this FEMA claim right now. They've changed it since Sandy, actually. So I can get an advance on my claim pretty quickly once I submit it. So I'm not too concerned about that. We do have some expenses that we're putting into our claiming bucket that may be, I'm not going to say questionable, but they may be, you know, there may be some issues with regard to them being qualified expenses. So we're gonna say that, you know, and push for they are, because we think they are. One example is this cleaning crew expenses. It's our position that those folks are cleaning up mostly COVID-related extra waste, and that's you know, how we're going to present it. So you know, whether or not that gets allowed or not, that's something that we'd have to talk about. But overall, I don't think that we're going to see a significant financial hit from this event, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know, you know, and we're in June. We're in the middle of the year, and I would expect that you know, these costs will continue. There'll be recurring costs, certainly longer. duration than a hurricane. I know we had discussed something similar to this with the Sandy task force as to, those reimbursable expenses, and the experience to a person, to a municipality, was the difficulty in getting those reimbursements and having to go through the process that you're talking about. And it was long and drawn out and divisive. So, and I know we're accruing costs for extra personnel and other things like that. So, but it sounds like we're in pretty good shape. It's nice to hear that your assessment is that we're not spending nearly as much as I think I had in my head. So, let's hope for the best and go forward. But I'm glad that it's in your consideration. And certainly, I'm just curious. Actually, the basis of my question was how it would affect the audit for next year, because if it was a larger amount, obviously, it would skew some of the numbers, not through any fault of ours, but through the reimbursement process. So thank you, David, as well. Thank you.
All right.
Len, I'm glad that you're waiting a little bit, because chances are quite, I hope not, but we could be seeing a second wave of COVID, and those expenses would have to be captured in as well.
Let me just point out to Len that there might be some other expenses that we can put in for. The police have run up quite a bit in terms of additional patrols of our beaches to maintain social distancing. We have the protests, which normally, would not have led to as much police overtime, but because of their watching out for social distancing and trying to protect public health and making sure people were wearing masks, there were some additional costs associated with that. So, as we look at it all, there may be some things that are potentially reimbursable, but we're not seeing the devastating losses that other areas with health departments are seeing in terms of expenses. A loss of revenues, perhaps with building permit fees or mortgage tax revenues, but CPF. But so far, those funds seem to be doing okay as well. So there might be some loss of revenues. We don't know that loss of revenues are going to be reimbursable. I have one concern, Len, that you're aware of, that the state and county, the county gives us a fair amount of money through sales tax for our police department. The state gives us money in grant monies and other things. They're both suffering very significant fiscal challenges, and if we don't realize that money, or that money gets delayed, we might have some cash flow type of issues. So just so you're aware of that, we have projects that are grant funded, and if we don't get those grant monies that were approved for, that could be a real challenge, and may affect our ability to move forward with some of these projects. Well,
yeah, you saw the email this morning from the Bridgehampton study and whatnot,
right,
from Theo's office. Yeah.
Right. So I'm a little bit concerned about that. So let me also, too, I wanted to say this before, but my phone was muted. I wanted to congratulate you, Len, on a second year in a row of a perfect audit. I said this last year. I had never seen a audited annual audit that had not a single recommendation for improvement. So you deserve a pat on the back for that. At least virtually a pat on the back. In all my years, I've never seen that. So that's great. I'm sure the auditors looked really hard to find something that they could say you could do better, and they were not able to find it. I know there at one point there was an issue with some of the reimbursements for, I guess, cash outlays and things like that. But then you did find out that we were doing that all electronically, and we had all the backup documentation you were looking for. So you almost had something.
Yeah.
But no, that's good. I know you guys are very thorough, and we appreciate that. And I think that the board is we're very confident and comfortable with our financial procedures. We've through the years put so many different oversights and protections in place to protect taxpayer dollars, and now we're seeing it pay off. So that's great. In terms of looking forward, Len, are you seeing issues, COVID-related issues? I know we have the tax freeze in place, not the tax freeze, but the assessment freeze in place this year.
Well, actually, we're going to be starting the budget. Believe it or not, it's July. Right around the corner, and we start our budget process in July. We will have to look at where we are with the tentative assessment roll. I don't think that it's in the past 3 or 4 years we've seen really nice increases in the assessed valuation of the town. So that's helped us maintain basically, actually, even a tax rate cut because we've had an increase in the assessed valuation. I don't think you're going to see that this year. And
well, you won't see it. Interestingly enough, property values aren't going down. This pandemic has actually led to property values going up. It's crazy, but everybody wants to get out of the city and be out here. The real estate market is extremely hot and values have gone up, but we have frozen valuations for tax assessment purposes. So we're locked in. That was we said for 2 years we're going to lock everything in and look at our whole system. So we won't be able to benefit then by that growing tax base in terms of the rate. But I don't know if there's going to be any cap relief this year that the state will provide because of the pandemic. I suspect they may have to do something because a lot of municipalities are not nearly in the type of strong financial shape that we are. A lot of municipalities.
Yeah, I did hear some of that on the calls that they were talking about eliminating the 2% tax cap briefly, or suspending it anyway.
A lot of the towns across the state actually get sales tax revenues, which is that's the biggest hit right now that I see is sales tax revenue. Yeah. And some towns are largely dependent, more dependent on sales tax than they are on property taxes. We virtually don't get any sales tax other than for public safety that the county voluntarily shares. It's not they're not mandated to share. So hopefully we'll get that piece. But other towns probably are going to need some relief because of that, because of the pandemic shortfall.
Well, yeah, and if they cut out CHIPS funding or any of the other state pass-through monies, we'll have to make that up in local dollars. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting budget year because, again, the state's not giving us much indication of where they are. So, we'll have to see. I have to note that our mortgage tax revenues actually are coming in higher than we budgeted. So, that's a good sign.
But
our interest income now is lower.
But our debt service will go down too because it will borrow at lower interest rates.
Yeah, right. So it all goes into the pot and you mix it up and then somehow we get a budget that gets thrown out. I don't know how they do it. Those accountants.
I think mortgage tax is good because the real estate market's been good, but also because of low interest rates have caused more people to refinance. So
yeah, I'm seeing our mortgage taxes are up about 15% from last year.
And that's got to be close to $1 million, right?
Yeah.
So that's
figure.
Yeah, that's very good. What about CPF revenues? I think they're pretty strong too.
Yeah. No, we're not. I would love to. I wouldn't love to, but I would like to sit here and tell you that everything is dire and we need to tighten our belts and everything like that. But the fact is that the revenues are coming in, and we're monitoring our expenses. So I think the town is doing very well operationally.
In terms of
credit, that's a credit to us.
You may not know the answer to this, but in terms of property tax collection, and I understand the county makes us whole if people don't pay their property taxes, but from the numbers I saw preliminarily, it looked like we were doing pretty well in terms of people actually paying their taxes on time.
Yeah, we were on par with last year.
Yeah,
that's big.
So that's good stuff.
Well, the bank. What I was saying before, we were earning interest rates of about 1.25% on our money because we have a significant amount of money in the bank. Unfortunately, that rate is now down to 75 basis points. So that's a pretty large reduction in interest income. But,
Yeah.
All right. So again, congratulations, Len, on another stellar year of financial reporting. I see John's got the thumbs up. I'll do the thumbs up too. Julie's got 2 thumbs up. So, all right, your job is secure for the short term.
okay.
Um,
Well, you know, I wanted to retire, so now I can leave on a high note soon.
There you go. And we still maintain that AAA credit rating, Moody's and Standard & Poor's. But what they do, they did something across the board with all municipalities. They changed the outlook to
Yeah, uncertain. Yeah, they changed well, it had to do with all municipalities nationwide, actually, because of the uncertainties regarding the revenue streams.
Yeah.
But it didn't, you know, obviously people were very happy to buy our bonds. We paid 1.69% in interest.
We're still as good as it gets in terms of
Right.
safety.
Yeah.
So, and that's good. I know that the first bond sale we had to postpone because the markets were too turbulent at that point. But
Yes.
now we're in much better shape. All right. Anything else? All right. David and Sean, I guess we're good.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you very much.
You appreciate the work you did.
I appreciate it. And thank you
Len-
very much. And everybody stay safe.
All right, you too.
Thanks, you too.
Yeah.
You too.
Stay well.
Thank you.
You know, Len, on the revenue side, we're doing some things differently this year. It sounds like, you know, when Ryan's on the phone, some of the restrictions we put in place on beach permits are maybe leading to less revenue, like the non-resident out-of-towners. We're not doing the seasonal permits, so we might see a shortfall in beach permits. But I have you know, we're making it up, it looks like, in rental permits, people legalizing their properties. So we might come out okay there too. And at some point we'll start selling the day passes again.
A bunch of the costs that we're incurring is going to be part of my claim, because a lot of that stuff we're doing now, we wouldn't have done had it not been for COVID-19.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
But in terms of the revenue loss,
Revenue, yeah.
we don't know that revenue losses are reimbursable, but we'll find out.
The revenue loss shouldn't be eligible for federal reimbursement, I don't believe. But as you said, Jay, we're seeing a huge influx. And, you know, Kristen has stated to us that day pass sales tend to be highest in the months of July and August. And we're talking about the restoration of day pass sales potentially to some degree during that time period. And the rental revenue, the inadvertent, you know, side effect of restricting to residents only is definitely increasing the submission of rental applications to the town right now too. So I don't know that it's going to be a wash, but it'll certainly be helpful.
Yeah, well, that's going to be reoccurring too, which is nice.
No, but the costs that we've had to outlay for protecting the beaches and doing all the things that we've done to protect people from during the pandemic is a reimbursable cost. You know, at some point, you know, I think that's actually a larger, I keep thinking in my head it's a larger number. I know what you're saying, Len, but you know, I think over time we're going to find that we spend out in front a lot to do that. And I know Kristen has indicated that it's some parts of the day passes and things aren't a huge percentage of the income to parks to begin with. So that considering the increase in rental revenue, I think we're net neutral or positive. We may actually be positive at the end of this.
We know, and maybe this question for John or Len, with our solid waste management, you know, we've been taking in a lot of garbage, more than usual, just because we have more population in the off season than usual. I know the green bag program is sort of self-sustaining in terms of, we charge for waste pretty much what it costs us to get rid of, but the recycling program has been a real loser for us. Have we looked at that? I know it's an enterprise fund. Do we know where
I
we-
haven't, I mean, not off, I would have to run those numbers, yeah. I mean, I could get it for you, but I don't have it off the top of my head.
We'll have a report from Christina on that to see, if there's been an impact on that. But as you know, that problem started almost 2 years ago with the change in the world recycling market. So the revenues that we expected to get from that obviously dried up, and in some cases we may have to renegotiate our contracts, on how to deal with waste. So that remains a problem.
So my concern is because that was self-sustaining years ago in terms of we were able to sell the recyclables for enough to basically make enough to run the program. And then, about 2 years ago, it started to slide. We lost the Asian markets and we had to pay to get rid of recyclables. So we saw like $1 million shortfall about a year ago in that solid waste operation. And my concern is that during the pandemic, that may have swelled even further. I don't know though, until we look at that. So, why don't we get a handle on it? And then, I still have questions.
Yeah,
Well,
we'll take a look at it. We'll run some numbers and see where we are. But you
Yeah.
also keep in mind you had a higher population than we normally would have in January, February and March.
Right, more garbage.
Yeah, and I think
Right.
to Christine about this, there may be people who are just bringing in their recyclables and not bringing in garbage in green bags because we take what they'd have to pay for to get rid of. And, we might want to relook at that, maybe charge a fee to use the recycle, like a one fee for the year. You can, that's what East Hampton does. Or maybe have a different type of bag for recyclables or something where you pay for how much you produce. We're just going to have to look at it. So,
Yeah, I mean, in terms of volume, that's what we'll be talking about at the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, I'm sure, to see that. It's only been a few months to see what that trend might be. I have no idea. That is something that we discuss a lot. And, it's not that we're not making money from some of our recyclables. We're just making less than we used to. And, having to renegotiate contracts and things like that. So, I would suggest, Supervisor, maybe at some point a good work session item to have in the coming months.
yeah, I don't mind recycling or subsidizing recycling to a point because it's the right thing to do, but not at $1 million a year. And if it's even higher than that, I think we have to really revisit it. A lot of people have carters that they don't use our facility at all. And so then the rest of the taxpayers are subsidizing those who do. And I just think it's worth having that conversation, whether this is we want to stay in, and I understand you don't have to convince me that's the right thing to do, that, we want to reuse and, recycle materials, but, we have to be good financial stewards as well. And if what was a break-even thing is now costing $1 million, how do we fix it to maybe lose less or maybe get back to even?
Well, I mean, there's obviously two approaches. One is a pie in the sky approach, and that's obviously dealing with manufacturers and packaging, which is an insurmountable lobby, at least at the municipal level. And the other is to be more efficient in putting in those recyclable materials that actually make us money, and then looking at a more centralized or cost sharing concept throughout the East End, where we all share in that revenue. I mean, there's as you well know, there's been a lot of discussions along a lot of levels right here. We were just embarking on that when COVID hit. So I'm sure we want to take this up as the first and next agenda item when we're up and operational again.
All right, appreciate that. All right. Any other business before executive session? Anything anyone wants to bring up?
I had a North Sea CAC Zoom meeting. I don't remember what day it was, a couple days ago. And most of the discussion was about the beach, the road end beaches, and not only what happened in the past, what's going on now things have seemed to calm down a bit at several of the spots. There's still some problem areas, I believe. But also going into the future, people were wondering what happens if, you live in the neighborhood and you want to walk to the beach. You're going to have to show a form of ID or something forever, What happens if you have a family out for the weekend and they want to go to the beach? How can they get to our beach? A lot of interesting questions and stuff that I think that we're going to have to think about in the future as well, how we address them.
Thank you. Yeah, so, as you know, when I put that executive order in place, originally it was just going to restrict the parking. And then in consultation with the police department, recognized that people were going to drop people off. They were going to come out here, drop off the coolers, the fishing equipment, everything else at the road end, and then go, a mile up the road, however far we said, and park the car, take a skateboard or a bicycle or walk back, one of the people, the driver. And the only way we were going to actually put an end to this influx of individuals is to get a message out into the kind of the New York metropolitan area that don't bother coming out here. We won't let you onto the beach. And we're actually going to check to see, who's on the beach. And I instructed the police department to only do that if we really are seeing overcrowded conditions, so that we knew that we had room on the beach, for our own tax-paying residents. And that seemed to make sense. I don't know if the police have asked a single person yet to show ID. It's really just there, it was there to get a message out quickly into that, area that was, people were coming out. As more beaches open in different places, more opportunities open, I think the pressure will diminish. I do not want to keep these restrictions in place, that restriction or the parking restriction, without the town board. I think that some of it makes sense on a more permanent basis during the summer to reserve the parking spaces closest to the beach asset for our residents. Maybe it's 500 feet, whatever it is. It's sort of front row seats. The best parking places should go to our taxpayers. And there may be some roads that you want to leave as unrestricted altogether, to not put any restrictions on. I think we need to do more of a comprehensive look, and we ought to introduce legislation and hold a public hearing and, on that legislation and let people weigh in like we did with Long Neck Boulevard. We had some of the neighbors who were pretty upset, who said they didn't want it restricted. They don't use the ocean beaches. Now they got to pay $40 to get a beach sticker. It's a pain for them and costly. So I think that, we need to have that conversation. And I think we should do it relatively soon. And, we do have the next town board meeting is going to be, not work session, but town board meeting is going to be in person. And we're going to allow some public. So I would like to see that resolution developed, in consultation with the police and public safety and the trustees and, the community, and try to come up with the right policy. I'm not sure that going back to no restrictions is right either. I think it's probably somewhere in the middle of where we are today, and where we used to be. So I don't know,
Well,
Julie.
I think that the North Sea community was very appreciative of what we did, but wondering what's going to happen going into the future and would like to have a say in it, which I'm sure that every unique little community that we have that has these beach road ends is going to want the same. They're going to want to chime in on it. And of course, that's what we need to do.
We're going to have to resist the temptation a little bit. A lot of these communities that front these beautiful beaches and waterways, you know, I will not be surprised that most of them would like to have them primarily for themselves. But they are public assets, and we're going to have to find the right balance between not allowing them to be overrun, but also not allowing them to be, you know, the exclusive domain of the property owners that front them. And, you know, this battle for beach access has been a very long one, and it's a very passionate one. And we have seen sometimes some of the, you know, the beautiful beaches, you know, get property owners along those beaches get, you know, very active in terms of trying to restrict access to those places, and you know, long court battles and things like that. And you know, I think, you know, we as a body need to defend the rights of beach access for all, and you know, find the best fit that sort of balances those two things.
I totally agree with that. I think, you know, beach access means different things in different parts of the town, and has, you know, different conditions depending on the neighborhood and the physical situation. So it's a long conversation. You know, I just want to remind the board that we're only in phase 2 as of a day or two, and we still have a long way to go. We haven't reached summer yet. We don't know what the future holds at this point, but I think ultimately the conversation would involve a committee that's formed to discuss this with the right representatives, as to Councilwoman Lofstad's point, from different parts of the community to all weigh in, but also as a way to educate. I think, you know, some communities in different parts of the town are very unaware of the situation regarding the road ends in other parts of the town. So I think that's an important thing to understand, the issues affecting these very different communities relative to beach access. So, and I know we've talked about doing that. I think the timing of it is important. I'm not saying timing meaning now, and timing when we're learning a lot through these issues right now, particularly with beach ends and beach openings. And if we capture that information, it'll better inform a decision that we can make as a board.
So does the board want to establish a committee to look at this, or do you want to just do this internally and then hold a public hearing? I mean,
well, I think you need feedback from other people, but we're in the middle of this. I don't think we're at the end. There's a lot more that we can learn right now. And so far, what you've done is, as far as the emergency orders, has helped tremendously. And I believe that needs to stay in place for this time period until we get to phase 4. We find some normalcy. We don't know what's going to happen in September, but we're learning every day, and I think that's information to have to inform whatever decision the board is going to make.
I think I can remove that provision at some point about checking who's on the beach and just focus on the parking, and bring that back if I need to. So, because I'm a little bit uncomfortable with it too. It's a little bit too much government for me to, people ought to be able to walk down to the beach in their bathing suit and not have to have their tax bill or whatever it is in their pocket, or car registration. So I think that we could probably lift that piece of it. But I'm also uncomfortable in maintaining these parking restrictions by executive order very long. I have to do this every 5 days, renew it. And as we go from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3 to phase 4, and things start to open up again, I'm not comfortable continuing even the parking restrictions by executive order.
This is going to be drastically different when other municipalities open their beaches, particularly New York City.
Yeah, I'm willing to do it for the month of June. I'm not willing to do it right now for the month of July. So, and if we do a committee, it's going to take a while. I guess if these road ends start to get crowded again, we can, and we still need social distancing, we can do it again. Provided there's a concern still about coronavirus. But I'm looking at doing it okay. I'm sort of okay through the month of June, but as we hit this, the main summer season, I'm not comfortable with it unless, the conditions remain bad. And then, of course, I would do it again. But I'm hoping that by July 4th, things are really starting to open up again. So, but then we can have a committee, and we could put the trustees on, and the Beach Buggy Association, and the Surfcasters Association, and the Property Owners Associations, and various user groups, and we could try to come up with a good policy, or we could go to Ryan and Bay Constables and police department and say, which road ends does it make sense to continue? Like, I don't mind a 500-foot restriction almost at all of them, because that's not too bad. People can walk 500 feet. As you start to push back to 1,000 feet or more, a lot of people, you may not be so physically able to walk that distance, and I become less comfortable with it.
Well, and I agree with you. It's the enforceability of some of these things. I think that's what really needs to be looked at. I think we look at it internally first, from the perspective of the departments that are going to be affected by that, from permitting to enforcement to the police, and then widen that by getting input from residents in particular areas or different stakeholder groups. I mean, thinking out loud here, but obviously we need to have a common sense approach to this.
Okay. Well, I think in the interim, I'm willing to remove the portion about checking licenses and perhaps reduce from 1,000 feet to 500 feet, and then maybe that can continue for a bit while we figure out what the long-term best interest, best policy is, and then we can put that in place when we're ready.
I definitely think that we need to check in with like the Bay Constables to see where they think the hotspots still are, because I've heard that there's still a couple hotspots. So I'd love to check with them first before we do anything.
Julie, do you want to reach out?
I will.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it may not be a one-size-fits-all policy for every road end.
I agree.
It's hard to say right now. But, okay. Any other business?
Just an announcement. I've been meeting with the Airport Noise Advisory Committee, and I just want you to know that they are studying this issue. And as per a meeting that we had about 2 months ago, where the pilots are now using a voluntary route across Shinnecock and Hampton Bays out into the ocean. What this group has been reporting is that helicopter pilots are now avoiding the North Fork, coming down across the western part of the town out into the ocean, over Hampton Bays, and then over to Robbins Island, Noyak, Sag Harbor area into the airport. So they're looking at those flight paths and to see what the impact is on the residents of Southampton town, and we'll be coming to you in the coming weeks or months on that.
All right, thank you for that. I'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah.
I know there's an event, I think it's this weekend, a drive-in movie event at the Hampton Classic grounds, and I'm sure you've heard the Hampton Classic is canceled for this summer. That's definitely going to be a different summer without that event. That's a major event. It may free up some time for us because we do a lot of work, police work, in association with the Hampton Classic, and putting all the permits together for that.
My office does quite a bit of that. Yes.
And Sunday, so, but you're busy though reviewing other special permits. I know. So
yes, we are.
And I appreciate the work you did with this upcoming drive-in movie event for this weekend. It's a fundraiser, charitable fundraiser, and AFTI again is one of the principal beneficiaries of that. You're seeing a bunch of these sort of creative ways to be together, special event proposals, right, in different locations. Can you just speak a little bit about what you're seeing and how you're handling it?
Well, I just want to mention that we have a team in place that reviews all of these, includes Ryan and the fire marshal's office under Ryan, and the police department, land management, everybody. This goes through the attorney's office also to be reviewed for, land use, ag easements, all those types of things, police needs, inspections and such. Right now we are seeing an influx of applications for drive-in movie events, which is something new for us. We have not had these before. I think they are a development from one of the executive orders that came out of the governor's office regarding drive-in movies were able to be operational, which probably was focused on existing drive-in movie establishments, but these, I believe, developed out of that executive order. And they're very creative, and people are trying to put together events that the community will benefit from currently, that will be able to allow them to social distance and have some sort of fun outing to attend in the absence of many special events being canceled, events that would otherwise families would attend and be able to enjoy.
Are you seeing, I imagine you are, Sunday, normally you'd be very busy right now with permits for marathons and half marathons and walkathons and all those types of events, bicycle events. I guess they're all not permitted, right?
Well, it depends on what they are. Some of them may be able to, in later phases, reinvent themselves in different sizes. Things are changing rapidly. Ryan works very closely with my office in letting us know the most recent updates so that we can advise the applicants of what their future may or may not look like. Many events have decided, our more established events have that take a tremendous amount of advanced planning to, like the Hampton Classic, for example. A lot goes into the planning of that event. People come from all over the world to attend that event, and the planning, it takes place quite a bit ahead of time. So, some of those have made decisions to not go forward this year and are planning for next year's event at this time. We have many people, like those types of events, if they have paid in advance or such, are taking credits and are deferring that payment towards next year's event. So I worked with the comptroller's office on establishing a process for that. And many are just postponing, whether they're marathons and things along those lines that are more local and can switch gears and still have the same audience that would be participating, because a lot of those people live out here, into September or October if it's that type of outdoor event. That's generally what we're seeing right now.
What about parades? Do we July 4th parades, Labor Day parades?
As far as I just heard, which is not something that comes through my office, but I believe I heard that the July 4th parade for the village of Southampton has been canceled. We didn't have the Memorial Day parades that we normally have, and
St. Patrick's
Day parades. A lot of those things just couldn't be done manageably in an appropriate social distancing manner that would have been acceptable.
What about San Gennaro? Is that something still on? Rick?
Well, maybe our councilman can weigh in on that, because I haven't actually heard anything in regards to that particular event.
Well, Sunday, you were going to hear from me by Monday.
Uh-oh.
We are canceling our fundraisers and our small events leading up to the feast. We don't really get started till July with our vendors and our sponsorships. So we were just leaving it on the table for another couple of weeks to make a decision. If we had to make it today, we probably would cancel it. But we're hoping in some form it can take place. It is late September.
Yeah. But the councilman and I had a conversation about this the other day too. Obviously, a lot of people are interested in mass gathering events, and we don't have a crystal ball right now. Obviously, I mentioned earlier we're petitioning for even small increases to the state for mass gatherings. Generally, what I'm telling people right now is anything that's scheduled for beyond July 13th is potentially still in play. We don't know. But at least that would put us into, if we followed a 2-week progression of phasing, that would put us a few days into phase 4. So it gives a little bit of a buffer. We're trying to give people at least some sort of an outlook at, anything before that date. We're not even in phase 4 at that point. The numbers are still going to be pretty low as far as what's going to be allowed to gather. So odds are no gatherings before that point, unless there's some serious lifting of those restrictions by the state. But phase 4, arts and entertainment open, which means you're going to start to have people being able to gather inside, theater spaces and things like that. So outdoor gatherings might be a little less restrictive, and we're hopeful. That's all we are right now, is hopeful, but we're trying to maintain a balance between giving people too much hope and, canceling everything. And it's a tough balance, and we know everybody's got timing constraints placed upon them in terms of booking things, booking acts, notifying the appropriate people, and you want to manage the expectations of your patrons, your visitors, your guests, your parade goers, all of that stuff. So it's a tough balance right now. We're doing our best to kind of walk that line, but that's where we're at.
Now, Sunday, is your office sort of like the central clearinghouse for information on the cancellations? Because there's so many events, from like West Hampton, Oyster Fest, to fall festivals, to, various street fairs and craft fairs that people have come to, just love in the summer. It's part of the summertime. There's a lot of big fundraising events for like the hospitals and things like that. Is there a place where the public can go to see if something's canceled or not?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, most of that information the organizations release once they make a decision. It depends. I have a chart of events that we manage annually, and we're just trying to keep track of the cancellations that we oversee the permitting process for. And, that's the best that we can do. We've been working under reduced staffing and trying to manage to make sure nothing falls through the cracks as far as managing what we do. But I'm getting my information like everybody else, quite frankly, whether I read it or I see an advertisement or an article online daily. We get updates. But that's really how it's taking place right now.
All right.
So if I could ask Ryan a question. Ryan, you might be the best to answer this. The summer concerts that we sponsor, both at Good Ground Park and East Quogue, do we think they'll start taking place in phase 4, which would be after July 8th?
We're, again, I had this conversation with Connie and Frank the other day as well. I know I think the general position of the board, and I know, Jay, you've spoken with me many times about this. We want to try, and we've tried throughout this whole thing, to provide people with as much access to outdoor environments and entertainment and capabilities that we can, whether it's the parks, the beaches, this, that, the other thing. So I know one of our goals is that if we can do them, while preserving safety, we would like to try to do something. I believe what we've started to do is to cancel anything. We're using the July 13th benchmark as, the Wednesday before that, we should be in phase 4, barring any setbacks. If we see spikes in COVID positive in phase 2 or anything like that, it's going to slow us down. So this gives us a few days buffer on it. This is the Monday following the Wednesday that we would enter phase 4, is July 13th. So right now we're we're pretty much shifting dates, I know, on anything that's prior to July 13th and pushing it to beyond. So we had some concerts, I believe, in I want to say it was Good Ground, that were scheduled tentatively for like July 2nd, but had a rain date of the 30th. I believe that Frank and Connie are already working on shifting to the rain date so that we don't even know that the rain date will be for sure at this point, because it's going to depend on what the state restrictions are. But we know that the 30th looks a heck of a lot better than the 2nd in terms of the possibility that we'll be able to do something. So we're trying to take some actions on our side right now, to my knowledge, to make some scheduling shifts so that those things are put onto dates where the possibility stands a greater chance that we'll be able to have them. And that's kind of where we're at. The benchmark is the 13th. We're holding on to hope that we'll be able to do some of these things. We might have to only institute social distancing, whether it's, gridding out a field space with white paint as if it's a soccer field or something. I don't know how we're going to handle that. But I think the other factor here too, and we discussed this, I think on the call the other day, the board meeting, and then with the committee meeting that I was on the other day, if we don't see spikes in numbers as a result of the recent protests, where in many cases social distancing was not well maintained, or masks weren't always worn. In some cases, masks were worn pretty well. In some cases, people spread themselves out, but not all the time. And not just talking about within our jurisdiction, but within the region. If we don't see a spike, that will bode very well for us to try and increase the ability for people to gather, because it'll mean that community spread is not occurring at the rate that it was once occurring at, and that scare is down a bit. We don't want to just open the floodgates, though. So it's a delicate balance.
Thank you.
I'm getting a lot of inquiries in regards to children's programs and people wanting guidance, and Ryan's been very helpful in trying to give whatever is manageable. We just did get notice that programs and potential non-sleepover camps were going to be able to open at some point, but the guidance is coming out and trickling out as to how you would actually maintain that, and it would be in much smaller numbers. The capacity would be reduced significantly, and there's a lot of guidelines that they would need to follow. But I think the parents, as well as the children and the organizations that normally hold these summertime camps, whether it's tennis or swimming or sailing or our parks department and our youth programs, are all kind of waiting to see how they can potentially move forward this summer and provide some sort of activities for the youth in our community.
And we're expecting some more guidance on that by the end of the week, as per the county call yesterday. I think the county has been promised further guidance on that by Friday from the state, and camps are supposed to be eligible for opening as of June 29th. So they're trying to get that out sooner than later.
Great, and we look forward to that, because I have a lot of calls that are coming in regards to accessing that type of information.
All right, anything else? All right, then let's end our work session. We can jump into executive session. Then we're going to do that on a private phone line. You should all have a call-in number, extension, and access code. And in executive session, we're going to get some confidential legal advice. We're going to talk about personnel matters and contract negotiations, and the Hampton Bays Water District tower resurfacing. So contract. So I will make a motion to end work session and go into executive session on those items.
Second?
Seconded by Councilman Bouvier. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we are.
Hey, everyone.
We're adjourned for all other business.
Thank you.